Agreed to. Claire Curran.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister expresses such passion for his portfolio, and I think that was a 3-minute speech, and an embarrassment. I'm glad to get the opportunity to talk about the government's much vaunted ultra-fast broadband policy. It was number 2 in John Key's top 10 pledges before the 2008 election. His personal guarantee was to deliver ultra-fast broadband fibre to 75% of New Zealand homes for $1.5 billion. People thought, that sounds good. So, how are we doing? 2 years later, and there's no broadband. 2 whole years. When National became the government, Labor already had a broadband policy, not packaged in such a sexy manner, but sound. 36 broadband projects in communities across New Zealand worth several $100 million, poised to roll out across the country from Hobsonville to Otago. They included fibre to the home projects for new communities, existing cities and rural areas. Many of them would have been built by now, but they all got canned by Stephen Joyce. It's taken 2 years for the government to recast its policy with a complicated scheme which may or may not deliver ultra-fast broadband at prices New Zealanders can afford. 2 years later, we get a bill before the House which is deeply flawed, a scheme dogged by complexity and secrecy. And the first dribble of a decision this week to roll out the fibre in some regional towns covering about 16% of the country, so that before the end of the year Stephen Joyce can get his photo in the paper and on the telly with a hard hat on, pretending to lay out fibre paid for by the New Zealand taxpayers. That's not ultra-fast broadband, it's ultra-slow broadband. It doesn't fill one with great confidence. Looking more and more like the big elephant in the room, telecom remains a massive problem for the government to solve. Labor supports this bill to Select Committee. We've got strong reservations. We have already publicly opposed a key part of the bill, the proposal to introduce a 10-year regulatory forbearance period into 2019. This prevents the Commerce Commission from playing a watchdog role over UFB and perhaps RBI prices as they have done in the mobile market. Labor has deep concerns that this bill weakens hard-fought legislative protections for consumers and exposes the public to an unnecessary risk of future monopolistic practices. The Telecommunications Act already includes protections for investors, so the proposed regulatory holiday is unnecessary. The government argues it's not a regulatory holiday, but they're playing with words. We don't like it, we've said we're opposed to it, and we will review it should we win government next year. Labor wants New Zealanders to have ultra-fast broadband, but broadband is just part of what's needed to deliver a digital transformation strategy for this country. We want New Zealanders to have access to the best technology to help transform our economy and take advantages of the opportunity that technology provides, to use technology to better deliver government services and better engage with its citizens. We need digital vision and a concrete digital agenda, and under this government and this minister we don't have either. It was Labor who developed the Digital Strategy 2.0, and it's this government and this minister that canned the digital strategy, the vision that surrounded this new network. There is no vision, no sense of what New Zealanders will be able to do with this network. Instead, it's about ticking the box next to that election promise of UFB delivered to 75% of New Zealanders in their homes. A promise that should never have been made. If Stephen Joyce had had any sense, he would have taken Labor's broadband scheme, rebranded it and gradually expanded it throughout the country. Instead, we've had 2 years of nothing. We want to be ultra-fast, not ultra-slow. We want equitable access for New Zealanders across urban and rural New Zealand. We never understood why the government needed to put in place two completely different schemes, one run by a Crown-established company, Crown Fibre Holdings, and the other one by MED. We want a broadband program that's underpinned by a set of principles: participation, accountability and transparency, access to technology, affordable technology. That's the key thing, because it's all very well talking about building a new network, but if people can't afford to access it, it won't be much good. Instead, this week, the government announced 2 out of 27 contracts for urban broadband and 3 shortlisted bidders for rural. Because it had to do things its way, this meant that successful projects already out there delivering fibre to people in rural New Zealand at affordable prices will be shut out. People like James Watts of InspireNet, who's laid hundreds of kilometres of fibre between Woodville, Pahiatua, Ekatahuna and Palmerston North. InspireNet charges $100 a month for 100 megabits per second access, and the government's plan is to deliver 5 megabits per access. Watts and InspireNet were shut out of the Rural Broadband Initiative after the government said they'd only take proposals from national companies. Watts has said publicly that the most disappointing part would be to watch the government pay someone to dig into schools that are already connected, courtesy of the community's own hard work. It's people like James Watts that we should be leveraging off. Instead, if there's one thing this government and this minister has excelled in trying to work out how to make its broadband policy slogan work, it's been secrecy, the cloak of commercial sensitivity to exclude the public from knowing what's going on in developing its newest network paid for by them. Why? Firstly, it didn't know how to make it work, and it's mucked about for 2 years, creating a complex, cumbersome dual system in urban, rural and rural New Zealand, which may or may not deliver affordable broadband. And secondly, telecom, the elephant in the room from the beginning, and it remains the elephant in the room. If telecom's going to be a successful bidder in ultra-fast broadband, then they've got to structurally separate. The country should know that the bill contains amendments to enable the structural separation of telecom if it's chosen as a preferred supplier. And I'm told by the MED and Minister's Office that amendments to enable this could be introduced as an SOP at the Select Committee. It's extremely concerning that it's in its submission to the MED's suggestions on how telecom should structurally separate into 2 businesses. The Commerce Commission said that the Ministry seemed more concerned with the interests of investors rather than consumers. Even more concerning is the suggestion that instead of an SOP at the Select Committee stage, it could be introduced at the Committee of the House stage. That would give the public and the opposition no time to submit or formulate arguments, and I'd like the Minister to confirm that that isn't so. It would be taking secrecy and arrogance and disregard for democratic process to the greatest extreme. And I put on record my discomfort and unease on what appears to be at least a perception of conflict of interest, where a board member of Crown Fibre Holdings consulted to technology vendor Huawei for a number of months and presented at a Huawei conference on the 17th of September, while at the same time Crown Fibre Holdings was directly involved in a process to select technology partners. Samina, a multi-continent telecom consortium of South Asian, Middle Eastern and North African telcos, wrote on its web newsletter on the 31st of August that Huawei was hoping to supply fixed-line fibre broadband infrastructure and beat competitors Alcatel-Lucent, Ericsson and Nokia Siemens to become the technology partner of the successful bidder or bidders in the UFB. They referenced John Key's Television New Zealand interview in July, where he said that Huawei could be a possible partner in the UFB. Tell me that's not a potential conflict of interest needing a quick response from the Minister and the board chair, but did we get one? No, it was denial and more secrecy. It all adds up to a muddle, a mess, a flawed process, a new network being paid for by $1.5 billion of taxpayers' money, which appears skewed in the direction of investor interests and not consumers' affordability. There's been very few decisions actually taken in 2 years. There's the big question of whether Telecom will be involved, and if so, what legislation will be needed to allow them to. And will the public be able to scrutinise and submit on it? If they don't get the contract, will they furiously compete with their existing copper network and make it unattractive for years for New Zealanders to access fibre? So many questions and doubts.